From the Houston streets, a deprived child exposed to drugs and the trade at a young age, facing 99 years of imprisonment. How did he overcome these obstacles, creating successful businesses that has been acknowledged by the mayor of Houston and so much more? I have King Lewis here with me today to talk about how he turned tragedy into triumph. Was it growing up in Third Ward, moving to the A-Leaf area? Was it a big transition for you moving to the suburbs?
Moving to the suburbs was more difficult for my parents because they've already established a way of living from that area, and since I was so young that it didn't affect me as much because I was new to everything, and then you really don't have a choice, especially growing up with older parents. And my parents were young, but my grandparents were a lot older because they come from a previous marriage, and then they had my mom, and now she's the youngest of all her siblings. So it was more disturbing for my parents that already structured their way of living, and a lot of people are not comfortable leaving something that's so full of excitement and the nightlife, and then coming to a secluded country consolidated area where it was, it was not their tempo. But for me, I adjust because I had no choice in, what I was going to do and how I was going to move. So they were, hey, this is what we're doing.
Seeing your previous documentary, being that you were exposed to childhood trauma, tell me about being exposed to drugs and its trade and life on the street.
Well, for me, it was one of the lowest points of my life. I can say that growing up in the poverty-stricken areas and watching your parents suffer from alcoholism or crack addictions and stuff like that, we could be honest, suffering from alcoholism and crack addictions and so forth things, that it was a wild experience for me. And I just found it dramatic, but yet it was nothing that this child could possibly do. It was nothing that I could do to change what these people are doing because they're adults. And I was more of just trying to go with the flow. But traumatically, yes, as I got older, I could see the trauma that it caused in the way I thought, my patterns, my living patterns, my behavior patterns, and stuff like that. So yeah, it was dramatic and traumatic. Me and my mom were best friends. Everybody misunderstood the mother that I had, but I was the only one who really kind of understood because we were best friends. Anywhere my mother would go, I would go. So you would find me in some of the lower areas, and you'd be like, what is this kid doing here? And the kid, yeah, I was a mama's boy. So knowing that, they're like, oh, what is this kid doing here? This kid shouldn't be here. And these are drug houses. These are places in Third Ward that are very high crime rate areas. So, in having me there, it kind of let me understand what she was going through. And then we started to establish that relationship to where, as I got older, we started becoming business partners. And what I mean by business partners, that I would buy the drugs, and I know she suffered from this addiction, and I would go out with her and have her to sell the drugs, and therefore she would be able to get chipped off some of the drug for selling it for me, so I wouldn't have to worry. Yeah, and I did it because I didn't have to worry about other drug dealers pimping her out or beating her because it's coming up short.
So you were her
and
best friend.
Yeah, I was her best friend. So I was like, hey, if you're gonna sell drugs and prostitute and be out here like this, let me be the guy that grew up with you watching this. Let me be the guy who keeps you out of those dark areas, because some nights she would come home and she would have those black eyes, or she would have those busted lips, and we're all running outside trying to find the John that did this to her, and we're not going to find that guy, and she's not even going to tell the 100% of the story.
Okay, so I know in your previous documentary you were talking about being in prison and facing 99 years in prison, and was it drug related?
Yeah, it was drug related because I say I was a product of my environment, and I honestly didn't know anything else but the drugs in the streets, because I endured going to foster homes and residential treatment centers because of my mother's substance abuse, and they would take me from her, they would give me back, they would take me from her, they would give me back, and I was just in and out of placement. And now I go to prison, and the irony of this story is that we went to prison together. We made the front page of the paper together, and we got arrested together, and we went to prison together. She was sentenced to 2 years, and I was sentenced to 7. And she taught me a lot about, this wasn't her first rodeo, so she taught me a lot about how to hold myself, protect myself, don't let people disrespect me. She taught me how to, mind my business and stuff like that. And she would write me these things in prison because they would let us communicate with each other. So I would get mail every day. And, eventually she went home, and, the substance abuse came back, and we lost that contact until I was released.
Okay, Lewis, how did you come up with Trap Kings? What was your inspiration behind it all?
Okay, so starting with Trap Kings Barbershop, I was working at the mall. And I was working at the mall for about 2-3 years. I was working at the mall and I was going to barber school. So the lady, she was really cutting me slack to get my life together. I told her my life story. She listened and she was like, wow. So what are you gonna do now? Come to work, build your career. And I was like, okay, cool. And she was very motherly of me and a lot of her barbers and her stylists. So she really helped me establish myself. She kind of taught me the game. She really showed me, not by verbally telling me, but by her behavior. And I could see how she conducted business with everybody. She was very stern, she was very strict, but she was very motherly at the same time. Even though she was a disciplinary, she also showed you love. So she would chastise you and then come back and try to hug you, and you'd be like, hell no, you just docked my pay. I'm not trying to be friends with you. But she was telling me, she was explaining to me the whole time that it's business, and in the business there are no friends. So if people show you any kind of love and respect, that's out of love. I used to go and braid hair at this little Nigerian lady's little sweet thing, and it's in the hood. So hey, she'll give us money to go buy weed and alcohol, or go to the club for the weekend. Don't judge me, but I mean that's what we did. If we needed to go out that weekend, we would go work for her for that day, me and my sister, and we would braid hair. We'd do quick weaves, and then the little $200, I would go and get everything I need for the club. That would pay for my drinks. That would pay for my clothes, whatever I needed, the gas to get there. And that's how I, partied my weekend, because I was young. So I had went back to her and I was like, hey, can I rent a little space out of here? And she was like, yeah. And my sister had advised me to go ask her. And I had went over there and I asked her, and she was like, yeah. But when I had opened the space, it was like, wow, we had rats, we had roaches, we had little working water. So I was like, you left the mall to come to this? So what do you tell these people? Yeah. So yeah, but it was like, I was content with that because I had no experience on running my own business or developing a business. I had no experience. This is a guy you're talking to with a GED that, just defeated homelessness to get this position that I'm in at the mall. and then I throw that away by a disagreement instead of being mature, where I could have broken down and said, you know what, you're right, and I apologize. But my pride was like, oh no, I'm this big barber, and well, my pride pushed me into position. And I tell people that, like, I didn't want to be in that position, but because of my pride, it forced me into that position. And that's when I came up with Trap King's Barbershop, because I was like, well, you can't call this elite cuts or, you know, something bougie. You have to call this what this is, because what? Yes, and that's how I got my name, because it was, we're on Bissonnette. We have prostitutes walking in front of the shop. We have, you know, you might hear gunshots, you might hear police sirens, and I'm like, wow. So I leave them off of this. But I mean, it came out to me doing my advocacy work with the community, I say, and me being an advocate of that, you know, because I came from the deprived community. It felt like God was placing me right where I needed to be, or the universe was just putting me, yes, to be like, hey, you can relate to these people, so therefore you need to be here, because some of these youth might need you. And I tell people all the time, like, these bills. But every time I get one of the younger adolescents in my chair, they'd be like, Louis, I want to be like you when I grow up. And I'll be like, really? You a whole thug with guns and all this kind of stuff. But I have to remember that I was this young guy that was unorganized and all off into, you know, this adventure. So therefore, they have to develop as well. You know, that's their product of their environment, just like I was. You know, they might be into guns in the streets. I was into drugs and selling and, you know, manipulating people and doing stuff like that. And, you know, so everybody comes from a different background. And then if they want to see the best of things, then, you know, I should be there to advocate them, to be like, hey, these are the things you should do. This is what you should do, and try this out. And that's how Trap King's Barbershop came about. And that's how I'm kind of stuck. And I get asked all the time, like, Louis, you're gonna change the name? I'm like, no. I think that's unique.
I like the whole concept and everything that you've been through to get that name. It fits Trap King.
Thank you.
Thank you, Louis, for being here tonight. It was such an amazing interview. I wish you the best in your business and success. I'm Segura Nino TV. I'm here with King Louis. You can follow us on social media, Instagram, Segura Nino TV, and King Louis 713. Make sure you hit the subscribe button.